simple as just being low, like, oh, okay, Erica's low in these three things. We're going to fix these three things. It's more of how do those things relate to the overall picture? And unfortunately, again, this is so mind blowing, but very few people are testing the whole element structure that makes up the body, both heavy metals and important minerals, both macro minerals and trace minerals. And I mean, these things activate all enzymes in the body. So like literally those enzymes won't work if you don't have some of these minerals, like magnesium, for example. Like even a heavy metal can't activate an enzyme pathway like that magnesium does. Now, some of the others, yes, to a lesser extent, but then they end up in your bones and that causes issues. And that kind of leads into like the difference of hair versus blood and all sorts of stuff, and why blood's not great for testing this. And so, yeah, I mean, it's very quickly, you know, this conversation where you're like, wow, everything is connected. Yes, that is the appropriate thing, the appropriate conclusion to draw.
Yeah. Welcome my guest, Barton Scott. He is the founder and CEO of Upgraded Formulas. He is a chemical engineer that uses background coupled with being a nutritionist and a researcher to start his company, Upgraded Formulas. Barton is passionate about helping people combat the stressors of daily life, the toxicity of the modern world, and the utter lack of nutrients and the mineral absorption issues that we all face today. He has made it his mission to reduce suffering by increasing the public's understanding of human body interrelationships. Okay, I want to welcome on the podcast Barton Scott from Upgraded Formulas. We were talking so much before this, but first and foremost, I met you at the Health Optimization Summit in London. And I just want to give a big shout out to Tim Gray because that was a phenomenal event. And it was mind blowing. The experts, as you were one of the experts that took the stage to talk about minerals and the importance of that for optimal health. And yeah, it was such an incredible event. And I'm so happy we connected there and that now we're going to exchange this important conversation about minerals and how this is pretty detrimental to our health, especially these days, because as we're going to go into why minerals is important and why we are deficient these days. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And yeah, I've just loved our conversation so far. So such a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is one of the topics, as I was mentioning, I'm really into health optimization myself, and I feel pretty knowledgeable when it comes to health. But I have to say, I didn't know a whole lot about minerals before I attended this summit. That's where I really was like mind blown of the importance of minerals. And I know a lot of people are talking about it now, especially when it comes to water and how our water is lacking those minerals and through the filtration and whatnot, but also how it's lacking in the food we eat today because our soil is depleted. So I knew the basic knowledge about it, but I didn't know how important it was to our health. And I think anybody listening right now will probably feel the same way, that they don't know, they know minerals is something we get and that it's important, and vitamins and all this, but really let's go in deep about why this is so critical. So it's going to be a fun topic. Let's geek out.
Yeah, let's jump into it. It's so overlooked, and yet it's elemental. So if we go back to ninth grade chemistry, I know like 0 out of 100 people want to do that, but just for a moment, for them, or like 1 or 2 maybe. I guess I was in that group. The periodic table is all the elements that exist on Earth that we know of, and it blows my mind that we're not testing for those regularly in a way that makes sense, in a way, whatever the best way is. And if that's affordable, great. If that's expensive, then okay, still got to do it. Like, it's so important. I mean, it's the building blocks of who you are as a person. I mean, all elements essentially combine to make proteins, fats, carbs, amino acids, everything. So when you think of it, your body, like how's the body, I did a 11-day fast to heal an injury that I had. And I did water and minerals, and I felt great. I got a lot of work done, like a month's worth of work done, and reset my whole, all the T cells in the body, which happens after only about 3 days. But like improve my skin, gut, brain, just reset all my hormones, all these things, and I felt really good because my glands, like adrenal and thyroid, were being nourished the whole time, right? So that's something that I think about a lot as a concept for people is, understanding that. Now, are you with me when I say this is incredibly important? It's more important than anything else you're doing. Frankly, it has to be. It's a law of the universe. Like, these are the elements. You're not testing for them, then you're absolutely guessing by default. And then that's absolutely going to cost you both now in the short term in terms of performance, and then the long term, unfortunately, in the case of longevity. So like, you just flat out won't live as long, and you won't live as well. And that's just like obvious once you understand some of the things that have become really clear to me over the last 12 years in exploring this, and developing products, developing a new process to get minerals to absorb better, and using my background. And so many different directions we could go in. I love talking about anything endocrine related because it's where all the energy is produced in the body. And just happy to help. I mean, this is such an important conversation with people. Like, you can literally hit pause on anything else you're listening to, because if you don't do this well, like literally every other health hack that you do will matter less. It just, like, if it's red light therapy, guess what? Your mitochondria need elements to produce energy. Like, it's not only light. Like, you need oxygen, but you need magnesium, you need copper to produce ATP. Otherwise, but also it's not as simple as, last thing I'll say for now is it's not as simple as just, and this now because you just got your hair analysis and maybe went through a consultation process. I'm not quite sure, but it's not as simple as just being low. Like, oh, okay, Erica's low in these 3 things, we're going to fix these 3 things. It's more of, how do those things relate to the overall picture? And unfortunately, again, this is so mind-blowing, but very few people are testing the whole element structure that makes up the body, both heavy metals and important minerals, both macro minerals and trace minerals. And I mean, these things activate all enzymes in the body. So like, literally, those enzymes won't work if you don't have some of these minerals, like magnesium, for example. Like, even a heavy metal can't activate an enzyme pathway like that magnesium does. Now, some of the others, yes, to a lesser extent, but then they end up in your bones, and that causes issues. And that kind of leads into like the difference of hair versus blood and all sorts of stuff, and why blood's not great for testing this. And so, yeah, I mean, it's very quickly, this conversation where you're like, wow, everything is connected. Yes, that is the appropriate thing, the appropriate conclusion to draw.
Yeah. Okay. So let's unpack everything you just said, because there was a lot you just shared. So first and foremost, why is it not talked about? Like, why I don't ever recall going to a doctor and then saying, like, let's do your blood work and test your minerals. So what's up with that? I mean, why is it not talked about, and why are so people ill-informed that the necessity of this? Because I know I've heard you speak about vitamins are no good without minerals if you're so.
Yeah. So vitamins work, well, if the body, let's take it from this viewpoint, if the body has all the minerals that it needs, and you get sunlight, and you absorb the sunlight really well, which some people do struggle with, but also many people struggle with, for example, vitamin D supplementation. Like, from a genetic point, they just don't absorb it either at all or very well. So I always say as much sun on as much skin as possible. But if you're doing that, going back to the long fast example, which there's people that have done even much longer fast than that, believe it or not. And yeah, it's just that if you don't if you have all the vitamins you would need, but you don't activate any of the enzyme pathways, because you don't have the minerals, i.e. you have mineral deficiencies, which we all do. We all have something that we can optimize and improve. And it's always this balance, right? Because you might overdo it supplementing this thing. Say you're over supplementing calcium, which a lot of people shouldn't supplement calcium. Almost no one should. But
Really?
again,
Wow.
yeah. And unfortunately, vitamin D causes a high level of calcium in the body, almost in every case. And that can be problematic for weight loss, if it becomes high. It can be problematic for absorbing other nutrients into the cell easily, particularly if you're having to go through the normal digestive process, which our products don't have to, thanks to the science, the way that we get them into the cell. And you notice that because cramps stop almost immediately when you take our magnesium, headaches, things like that. And your sleep's noticeably improved the next day. So when you have only those vitamins, your enzyme pathways just don't get activated, and that's huge, because it's as if it's as if they're not there. Yeah. So.
And then why is this not talked about or tested like it should be?
Well, it's not taught in mineral testing. It's funny. It's like, well, because it's so important. I don't know if it was just, it's a great thing that I've thought about for a long time. Why not? One explanation that I come up with is, well, it wouldn't have, unfortunately, just from the understanding that I've heard from a lot of different people, that the funding for medical school curriculum comes largely from pharmaceutical companies and has for a long time. And the natural path of having a hair analysis and having a deep understanding of that is that you would recommend supplements and not medication. The other thing is that when you get your mineral levels right, you don't need nearly as many supplements or medication. Now, if you've been living in your body for multiple decades, it may take a while to rebalance these things. It's certainly not an overnight process. And yet you do almost immediately, because the products work and absorb, you almost immediately notice results and benefits. So better sleep, more energy, more focus, less constipation, so therefore better detox, less headaches, better hormones, all these things, less anxiety. All of those, I mean, just upgraded magnesium alone, I think is like a life-changing product now, is what we're seeing for that. And
Remarkable.
we have a sleep study going on right now that I can't wait to talk more about. But yeah. So this is like the lens that I try to give people, because it's certainly changed my life. We wouldn't be here if I hadn't started hair testing, because blood, I think the other thing is, you just don't see this as an area. This is like part 2 of that question. You don't see this as an area to resolve when you're looking at blood until much later on, when so many other things are going wrong at that point. So you have all these distracting sort of things. So it's kind of like sitting at your desk and having like 30 different notifications go off all at once on different devices and things. And then, if you're sitting with a health professional at that point, they're trying to, like, if it's traditional medicine, then they are, which I call traditional medication, because it's not really medicine. Medicine would, in my mind, has a chance of restoring function. And medication has only the chance of, with almost every single drug ever made, with the exception of like a few, like metformin, there's just like such a small handful. Those are just masking the symptom. They're turning off those notifications that we see, so that we can, so that we have more like peace and calm and equanimity in our current state. Meanwhile, there's a smoke alarm going off that we can't hear. And so with that understanding, to go back to blood and hair, as an answer to this is, if you're looking at blood and going like, well, this is where we're looking, then the thing that you have to realize is blood is, because it's so important in the body, what we see is this, we're left with the fact that blood is life-giving, and therefore it's, because it's the top priority, the body pulls nutrients from your bone marrow and from your organs if it needs to balance your blood. So because of that, it will be years or even a decade later that you'll see a deficiency there. And by that time,
Wow.
there's an extreme deficiency.
Wow. That's
Versus,
fascinating. And
yeah.
also just touching on the reason why a hair analysis test opposed to blood is it also, I think this is what I heard when I was at the summit, that also there is more history in our hair
Mhm.
opposed to the blood. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's more history. There's also a larger amount.
Mm,
So if there's a larger sample size. So with that, what I would say is, so imagine you're conducting a survey and you poll one person. That's the case with blood.
mm,
It's like putting if you're using a car analogy and an oil analogy, you're like putting a dipstick in to check the oil, and you're going, all right, so the oil quality is, moderate, or it's definitely time to change the oil. Or, oh, it's fine, like, i.e., you're within range, Erica, like, great. But you're like, well, I came here for a reason, and it's not to find out that I'm within range and have nothing to work on. And that is how I went from spending like nothing on testing 12 years ago to like 15K to figure out what's an actionable test that I can work on. And that's how I started to realize this was such an area an area of extreme importance. So just to go back for a second to give this, some credibility. So I was working on finishing up my degree in chemical engineering, and I was born to older parents. So my mom was having some issues, and I had helped her slim down, and things had gotten better. But then she got diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, which is just a way of saying that they don't understand what's going on as it relates to autoimmunity. She
wow.
could have done really well from like fasting, having mercury fillings removed, all sorts of things that, super reversible, having mineral status checked, having products that absorb really well. But what we noticed for her and I both, and I was starting to have some, as I was helping her, either from the stress of it, the stress of school, the general depletion of being in high school. I had been a wrestler at a really high level, and I would push so hard in that sport. I mean, I played football and ran track and stuff too, but I'd push so hard in that sport that I would literally have my vision blur a lot of practices. And, I was like, team captain, one of the top in my weight class in the country, and, could have wrestled in college, but also knew I couldn't really, because I could just tell I was feeling physically depleted. But so I was like, all right, let me like take on mental challenge. Definitely can't do, something like chemical engineering and wrestle at the same time. So I changed my focus to that direction, and had been supplementing because of wrestling. That's why I mentioned it, since I was 12. And so by the time I was 22, I had a lot of knowledge, and I had the depth of the lens of chemical engineering to look at this area and go like, I can just tell where like certain things just don't match up with the principles of chemistry, and just certain processes don't work. And I knew good brands, and I could tell that. So she had deficiencies after supplementing things for 3 months. I had things for a year and a half that I'd been supplementing, and we're both deficient. I had a girlfriend at the time. Her and her dad did the test too, a hair analysis. That is, after I went through all this testing on my own, and then I was like, let's all do this. And there was just, it was so actionable, it seemed like. And yet, and I had a great consultation. I got super lucky. And I think that's where a lot of people fall off, is like they get a hair test and it's affordable, and it's super valuable. It's also incredibly complex, and most people,
100%.
yeah,
Because I
right?
did get the consultation, but anyways, I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, exactly. So consultation is like eye-opening. It's like very confident, it's inspiring. Um, and I'd love to hear, your thoughts on it, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. But
Yeah.
the yeah, so having a great consultation with someone that's now retired, I learned a bunch there, and that really kicked off my drive. And eventually, I decided, instead of making like a huge conglomerate, more, even more wealthy, I would turn this lens and figure out how to optimize a process to get minerals to absorb better, which is something that chemies do around the world. Like, doctors might understand what's needed, or nutritionists understand like what's needed from a nutrition standpoint. Chemists understand end products. Chemical engineers understand process and how to change process. And we had a focus on nanotechnology. That seemed to be the future of both medication and, I thought, like, hopefully supplementation. And so, yeah, that's where we are today. We have some novel products, a unique process, and we're able to actually vanquish deficiencies, so reverse deficiencies, at least support them, and majorly, because what I realize is that if you only absorb 25% or less of a supplement, which is certainly on the higher end for most supplements, then you don't reverse the deficiency, because you're filling up a tank. Like, imagine you have the engine on your car running, and you're almost out of gas, and you're trying to fill up the tank. And as you're filling, your car's burning and burning and burning. If that fill rate is fast enough, i.e., you absorb enough, then you really can replenish and feel renewed and rejuvenated because of it. And that's what we want, right? We want that vitality. We want the energy. We want the stamina, right? To be able to get up early, like work out, work a full day, like go out in the evening. Like, we're recording this on a Friday, and I'm going to do all of those things. And yeah, like, I just got done traveling 6 weeks in Europe, both speaking and also just traveling and fun and writing a book and working, and like doing a lot of things I could otherwise never have done 10 years ago. Mid-30s now, was in my mid-20s then. My testosterone was half of what it is now. I'm literally like right around 1,000 and not doing hormone replacement. And that's because minerals are the building blocks of hormones. Kind of rambled there, so I'll just pause.
That's why I'm going to try to direct this, because there's so much I want to touch on. So first of all, as we were talking about, so here is my test. And if you're on YouTube, you could kind of, that says reverse, but these are all and you could probably see some of these. But the intriguing thing about this, and very important thing about this is, it also comes with a packet of explaining the minerals. What's really fascinating about this, first of all, when I saw it, two things I noticed right away: my calcium, magnesium were high, both of them above normal. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. Because I know magnesium is generally something that a lot of people talk about these days being deficient in, which we'll go into. But when I had the consultation, this is when it really got interesting, because the average person, when you look at this, you would read it and you would just look at, oh, what's below normal, normal, and above normal. But it actually comes down to more the significant ratios that matter, and how these minerals work together, which I know you'll go into explaining this. But when I did the consultation, the key thing that was mentioned is because my calcium and magnesium, and correct me if I'm wrong in anything I say, because I'm trying to reiterate what was told to me. When my calcium and magnesium are both above normal, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm absorbing that. And
Right.
actually, if anything, it's the exact opposite, which was explained to me. So you could go into this more of, I'm trying to think where to take this conversation because there's so many pieces to this. But since we're on the test, so can you explain why, it's not about the individual mineral, it's actually more about the ratio and what this means? Maybe we could go into, since I mentioned the calcium and the magnesium.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so that is a relationship of blood sugar sensitivity, essentially. And when your magnesium is high, for example, the what it and we always have a consultation where, believe it or not, we ask people questions instead of like a normal sort of and these are with certified nutritionists that are some of the best in the country. um, but they, so I have to say that they're not doctors, and also they're super qualified and really even more qualified in this area than almost anyone else. So, but that being said, they would ask you questions and actually listen to your responses, which is a novel concept, I think, uh, unfortunately. And with that, it's a collection of that, and also what are your results, Erica, and how does that match up? And then you start to see this picture, because if I'm asking you what your current supplementation of magnesium is, and you say, hey, I'm not supplementing, or hey, I'm supplementing this, or and I ask you about calcium intake and what foods you're eating and things like that, and what problems you're having, what symptoms you're having, what are 3 to 5 things you'd like to improve, what's a good outcome, what really matters to you, different things like that. What's your current supplement regimen, if you have one? Then I start to get really confident on, well, all right, yes, your magnesium is elevated because you're low in B6. Actually, it's not because you have too much magnesium. And your calcium is elevated probably because you're not absorbing it, maybe because you're low in boron, and or also maybe but in asking you about vitamin D supplementation, I find out that you're doing a considerable amount of vitamin D pretty often. Then I go, okay, well, for now we're going to back that down because of these things, based on these things. But that's a highly contextual conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I just think what's so fascinating is what matters is the ratios of how these minerals work together. And so let's unpack this a little bit, and let's go deep on a few subjects, because I know this test covers thyroid, metabolism, hormones, deficiencies, toxic metals. So there's so much in this testing. I think it's just the most wonderful thing ever. I'm so fascinated. I'm literally telling everybody about this because I think it's mind blowing, because when I went through the consultation and she walked through everything, again, I'm all about health optimization. I hope anybody listening as well wants and cares about health optimization. Or just to be healthy, right? Just to be like normal,
right.
at
They're
least,
certainly
right?
listening to the wrong conversation, if not. So they're
Yeah.
listening in the right place, if so. Yeah.
Yes. So one thing that I've heard you say is most people are deficient in something,
Mhm.
correct? And
Yeah.
so what is the most common deficiencies, would you say, that you feel is like the common denominator amongst most?
Yeah. So even, yeah, I think, who was it? It was like one of the incredibly conservative government agencies, though, like World Health Organization, said that 99% of people have at least 3 deficiencies, something like that. And yeah, so, and again, minerals rule everything. and they also help you to, so that is just one thing I wanted to clear up. The common deficiencies that I'll get to in a second. The other thing to understand is heavy metals don't accumulate in the body as easily when you have fewer mineral deficiencies, because there's the body's electrical system, and essentially that when you have a, literally a higher vibration that is, quite literally measurable, then you really do become less susceptible to things like viruses, parasites, and heavy metals that parasites thrive on, for example. So that's a very like literal, and I think there's also like a metaphorical lens that you could take from that too. So anyway, so back to common deficiencies. It depends on the diet and the person, right? So people that are following a vegan or keto or paleo or, vegan, keto, carnivore will have different deficiencies. Make no mistake, they will all have deficiencies. I think that's probably only most heartbreaking to the carnivore crowd, because they think they finally found a solution for everything. But there's a reason why we own the phrase "test, don't guess," and it's because although we have incredibly effective supplements, I'm not about just getting people to supplement. I want them to actually take ownership of their health, or have the ability to, through a consultation and a hair test, and better understand their health. Like literally, no matter, like you have a lot of knowledge in the world of health, and this was still eye-opening, wasn't it? Like, yeah,
Beyond. I told you, like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And obviously I got, just to kind of walk through my experience, obviously I got a protocol after of how do I balance things out? How do I optimize that? And then they do recommend to retest in 90 to 120 days. But so the protocol, actually, I'll include this because I think this is also, I felt this was very transparent, that the protocol that was given, it wasn't like she was recommending all upgraded formula supplements. So that said a lot for me, because generally when you work with a company, they're going to recommend their products. And that was absolutely 100% not the case. And I think that's very transparent. So I want to include that. But it
I
was,
think that's something I've never actually mentioned in a podcast, and it's
yeah,
because what I said earlier, like it might sound good, but I also mean it. Like we are about help. If you're willing to take more ownership of your health and order supplements and better understand your health, and you find that interesting, like this is something for you. Like, and that's
100%.
what.
100%. So let's kind of walk through some of the areas most important I hear talked about today, especially because a previous episode that I had this week on my podcast, which was about fertility and hormones with Dr. Jolene Brighton, that was at the summit.
Mhm.
And she talked about this for a woman out there. If you are interested in fertility or optimizing your hormones, it's not so much just your sex hormones, it's very much your thyroid. And so, can you explain what supports the thyroid when it comes to minerals, and why this is so critical to get into the right balance?
Sure. So it's critical to get into the right balance, because I'll tackle that one first. Because if your thyroid's not working well, the energy production in your body is going to be a really low. Some of the side effects are low core body temperature, which is like particularly nasty during the wintertime. Like, and so if you have to always wear a jacket type thing, even if it's not truly like cold, that's probably a sign. Cold hands, cold feet, skin issues, hair falling out, just like overall signs of vitality. So those are key. One of our foundational products for people, depending on their test results, again, is something called peak thyroid, PEAK. And that is something that I formulated because it was an answer to this question, that, and thyroid function was something I struggled with, because wrestling is essentially, through its calorie restriction and extreme, I can't think of a sport that requires like more just energy demands, like outside of UFC. I mean, it's just like insane. And yet you're not eating that much because you're making weight, right? So it's essentially self-induced hypothyroidism.
Wow.
And with that understanding, and that's not something I understood till years later, but certainly a lot of people have that. A lot of guys have this, they just don't know it. A lot of women know that they have issues, but a lot of people in general have this issue. And I can see it now in people visibly. I can actually, like, there's just different signs and symptoms that I've developed. Also, I can, at this point, after doing enough consultations, like I can hear certain things in people's voice. I can hear, like, it's just interesting. It's kind of hard to describe, but suffice it to say, I have a lot, and then also just like thousands of tests to collect that and corroborate that. But it's widespread. If you're listening to this, you probably have thyroid dysfunction, because it's just that high. I would say it's in the 90th percentile of people that have thyroid issues.
Wow.
At least to the point where it's not optimal and it's somehow holding you back. Like maybe you don't have the energy to start that, like, that business, or you don't have energy to like to date, or like I don't, like whatever it is, whatever your life goals are. So yeah, or you just feel run down all the time, and you feel like you've, in the past, like you had achieved a bunch of your goals, and like you're living your ideal life, and now you just don't have the energy you used to have. Maybe you're a mom or dad, and you're trying to balance all these different things, which is not an easy task. This is a big area for sure. So it's also adrenal function too. If you don't get your adrenals right, so I would say peak thyroid, our upgraded iodine as well. Most people are severely, like unimaginably deficient in iodine.
Wow.
So like, and also magnesium, like people are deficient in magnesium. The level of deficiency in iodine, when we do see it, is so chronically extreme.
Wow.
That even with a mega dose of iodine, like our product is, where it's a big dose, and you're also, I mean, it's optional. It's a dropper, it's a pipette. All of our products are liquid, with the exception of the magnesium, which is both liquid and capsule, just for ease. And yeah, so, and by the way, for anyone listening, if you do decide to try any of our products, if you don't, no worries. I hope you got something out of this conversation, but if you do, please dilute them. They're meant to be, shipped around the world. We ship to a bunch of different countries, and because of that, they need to be really concentrated so that we can do that. So please do your part and dilute them, and don't tell us that the products taste bad, because that's totally, avoidable.
Whatever.
Right. It's like, and our electrolyte now does taste awesome. It's the first product I put a flavor in. It's like lemon lime. It tastes like a non-alcoholic margarita, which I personally love, as you can tell. So where were we? So nutrients for thyroid, really everything that's in peak thyroid is what you need. It's iodine, selenium, a little bit of copper, and some zinc. Those all help with conversion from inactive thyroid hormone to active, which is something a lot of people struggle with, especially if you have a high RT3 value, which you can find in blood, and you do find in blood. But we do see insight to thyroid function and adrenal on the hair test for sure. So blockers of that, though, too much calcium, i.e., overdoing vitamin D supplementation. People have to understand, like, if you're listening to this, you have to understand that you can't just willy-nilly take a huge amount of something without knowing, like, the results. And then you can't just test once and go like done, like done, It doesn't work like that. If we were driving, coast to coast, or even like an hour down the road, we would look at navigation like 20 times to get there, right? Like how many times, right? And so if you're doing the same thing with your health and you don't look down at your navigation, like I don't know like how you expect to get somewhere you've never been.
Right.
So, and that is the goal, right? Like if you're optimizing, if you're trying to reverse a disease state or deficiency, because disease doesn't exist when the cells are happy, and the cells are happy when they have two things, which is they have all the nutrients they need and they can detox well. That is a happy cell, which leads to a happy organ, which leads to a happy body and a happy life. Like
100%. So again, I have so much to unpack. So the mention of iodine, when we talk about iodine, are we talking about sodium or salt? And if be the case, I know it's been told for years and years now that if you have too much sodium, you could get high blood pressure. But I know like one of the common things that is talked about now is getting Celtic sea salt and putting it into your water. And I know that's one of my protocols is to add half a teaspoon into my water. So I would love to hear from you. Can you debunk this basically? Because a lot of people, as we kind of at the top of the show, we were talking about how our soil is depleted. We don't have the nutrients or the minerals we once had. That has been said over and over again. The food we consume, it doesn't have the vitamins or minerals from ages ago, and then also water because it's been filtered and then minerals aren't added to it. So I know there's supplements out there to add those minerals back, but let's talk about salt a little bit. I'm curious what would you say to people listening in regards to that?
I would say first and foremost that you have to, you really have to test and not guess, like see our previous, sort of point on that. Because, truly, like if you're if you're just putting things in your body and you're not measuring the outcome, you don't know. Like I promise your intuition when you haven't been testing for years is not that good. It just isn't. Now after you have been, even if you're a deeply intuitive person, you might go like, wow, I think I might be low in this, but you have no reason to know if you should trust that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I talk to people all the time that are deeply intuitive, and they're like, yeah, I just feel like I'm low in like this or that. And I'll go like, wouldn't it be cool if you knew for sure? Like at least in my mind. And how easy is that to figure out? So that's what I would say is just like, do that and see where you are, and like literally don't do anything else, because any other thought is a waste of effort. That's like my like hyper, you could say like kind of hyper masculine focus on that. A more like, I don't know, let's try it sort of thing is going to get, I don't know, more like so results, frankly. So I'm not about that.
Yeah.
Do I think most people should salt their water? I think it's like part of what you're asking. And yes, absolutely. If you're doing a low carb diet, for sure. If you're living somewhere that's really hot and you're sweating a lot, yes. If you are living a fast paced life, then you're sweating and you don't really even realize it. And, if you're like stressed a lot, you're probably low in salt. If you don't eat packaged foods, which is great, you're probably also low in like quality sodium. And this actually, I think this is one of the more interesting things about it. So when your sodium is below a certain level, you can guarantee a personality that is temporary, but behavior that eventually becomes personality, right? That resembles bipolar disorder, right? And at the very least, emotional instability. And it just depends how far down. And I think about this a lot, like seeing homeless people in, different cities around the world as I've traveled, and thinking about how hot it is and how I like to sleep with it nice and cold, and how you get more restorative sleep. You also don't sweat as much. your body can't really hit deep sleep unless it's a couple degrees cooler than your normal waking state. I think people really do start to, as we would call it, go insane, or have these different, at least low level, at the very least low level emotional disorders because of sodium deficiency. Like even just that would cause that. And that's why I'm writing about something I've talked about for years now, which is that nutrition becomes personality over time. Specifically, certain nutrients and a lack of them become personality over time. And that is like one hell of a concept to really think about, because it will change your life for sure. And it certainly changed mine. And I've seen, like I said, my testosterone double as I've aged 10 years. Like I say double, it was like mid 500s to 1,000 now total.
Wow.
And like, wow, just like a totally different life, right? Because I remember having, like just this beautiful girlfriend that I was in love with, and not really having the sort of sex drive I should have. Like I had some, but like not, and it wasn't like, ED or anything. It wasn't erectile dysfunction. But it was just like, not as interested.
Right.
And I remember thinking like, wow, what a problem. Like in my mid 20s, like, and being fit too. Like I was thinking like, what am I doing wrong? And that was when I was probably a couple years into working on the research that eventually become action, and different processes and all the things that have become upgraded now. And it's just been life changing. So if I needed that then, and I had a six pack and I ate organic and I worked out and I was like one of the fittest among my friends, I felt like I had no room to complain too. It was like, but at the same time, I was aware that if I had this problem, then certainly a lot of people would at some point in their lifetime, if they weren't already experiencing it, because like I said, I pushed really hard early on in life, and that caused a lot of deficiency. So when I still to this day, those are some of those are pretty bad results. I've seen bad or worse results, but we're also able to help those people a lot more now because we have supplements that absorb well
Yeah.
versus just, like a quality brand that doesn't absorb well.
Yeah.
Quality and absorption are not the same thing.
Absolutely. And I know we taught you slightly touched on, you have a nanotechnology, and I bought your upgraded formulas magnesium. And I did see on there, it says the nanotechnology, and now I understand it. It's all about the absorption. Like you said, you were taking quality supplements, but it wasn't absorbing. So really, it doesn't matter if you're not getting the right supplement products. So I think that's what's really unique about your product line that I'm aware of. So let's talk about the hormones, because I think this one's really
Yeah, thank you for
fascinating.
that.
That you talk about copper and zinc, how those are the core minerals for our hormones. And so if you could kind of walk us through that, because I think that's what there's a lot of problems with people these days, I believe, with hormone imbalance. And for me, when I reviewed my tests, I was like, obviously a little, oh my gosh, what could be wrong? Do I have mercury toxicity and all these things? I didn't know what I would get because I've never done a test like this. It's pretty, my protocol isn't really expansive. It's nothing like I'm supplementing. Honestly, I think I'm supplementing 4 things, if that.
Mhm.
And it's little things. And one of the things is taking or eating 2 Brazilian nuts a day for the selenium. So it's like very simplistic, easy protocol. And just to think that I have this unique protocol just for myself based on my results, it's
Mhm.
amazing. Love that. But I want to know when it comes to hormones, because I think this is a big thing, getting our hormones in balance, because how much this affects other things, as you're mentioning the testosterone. And I think there's, I think this is talked about as well. Like men have lower testosterone than ever before. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. And I mean, it's our world is what I've heard statistic wise is roughly 1,000 times more toxic than any other time in history. The other way to say it is that in one day in an industrialized city, we encounter more toxins than our ancestors did in a lifetime.
Unreal. And we are very
So
fortunate because we're into this health optimization, going to this summit in London. We are informed by all these toxic products, that especially what we put on our skin and how that disrupts our endocrine system and so many things. Like, luckily we have submerged ourselves in this knowledge, but for those listening that aren't aware of these things, so much of our environment is toxic.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy.
It really is. Yeah, like there's a lot of things to really support. Going back to zinc and copper for a moment, if we can.
Mhm.
Yeah, so those are really important, and I actually think that the part of the huge rise we've seen in people, like, first let me just say, like, I don't care what gender you are, what you want to choose or anything like that. Totally, obviously it's your choice, but I do want people to be happy, and if I can help people be happier in their lives, awesome. Like, I don't care about religion. I used to be, I'm not religious. And I also don't care if someone else is. Like, awesome, I just want you to be happy. But I, will also provide a little bit of insight that most people have never heard before. And that is that zinc and copper control hormones. Hormones control how you feel. So if you strip either one of those, or if you have an extreme amount of one of those, for example, if you have a lot of copper in your body, either hidden copper, toxicity, which you'll only find in a hair test, as far as I'm aware. Certainly won't see it in blood. I can't think of any other way you'd find it. But that's bio unavailable copper. For some reason, the body's just not utilizing it. Then, and key point, with all of our products, everything someone's heard about forms, please check that at the door and just try the products and notice the results. Like, you'll notice, we have a sleep study right now with over 200 doctors, and we're showing on the Oura Ring, showing an improvement in deep sleep on average of about 30%, which, if that continues, that'll be the most successful sleep product that's been studied, that I'm aware of, at least. So which is incredible. Like, much more effective than, like, and it's, we're using chloride to bind the end product, so it's not magnesium chloride as you'd normally think of it. It's, again, through our own process. And we have selenium. Like, our nutritionist could have recommended that you take the selenium product, or
But she's like, take Brazilian nuts.
take Brazilian, like that, and that might work. You could. The only thing is, like, just to talk about that for a second, as well, and I'll get back to zinc and copper, is, of course, some people will be sensitive to the mold that can come with nuts. That's a toxic trigger. There's a reason why a lot of nuts are not on diets, and it's usually because of mold. I actually would love to find a way to fix that. But just like a lot of coffee has mold on it, things like that. Also, you just don't know, like, the actual level of selenium. Like, maybe it's low, maybe it's high in those. Having too much selenium is, like, very rarely a problem, like almost never. But yeah, also, just like not having to break your fast is cool. So that's one thing. Our selenium is a pretty good dose. I do like it. There's something else I was trying to think of to say about it, but ultimately, anyway, that's another option. Yeah, and that helps with thyroid function, and it's actually one of the most anti-aging things that are important for health, skin, hair, beauty, all the natural things. And it's in one of the products I'm putting out soon. It's going to be really cool. So yeah, zinc and copper is interesting. Like, so what I was saying there is, if someone has a lot of copper, then maybe it's hidden copper toxicity, maybe it's regular, they will likely I mean, just over time, at a certain point, just like with sodium, at a certain point, they'll experience certain behavior modification, like literally it's changing their hormones. They're going to have an extreme amount of estrogen, like just like that's just like how gravity works, you know. It's like, well, there's a extremely large object over here at this point in our solar system, and it's causing tides on our planet to behave like this. And it's like very predictable, like in the way that tides are predictable and moon phases are predictable. You could say that copper is causing estrogen to be high, zinc is causing a dominance over testosterone and progesterone being really that main hormone that governs a lot of things in the body. So like in the case of transgender, I would just love to do a study on people that either are transgender now or considering it. Just, it would be super interesting. I would love to see that.
Their balance of minerals that would be interesting.
It would be super fascinating, and just and also, God, it'd be, I mean, wouldn't be possible, but to understand like where they were 10 years before that, if they, like, for example, had a family as a man and was like really happy, and then at some point was not. It's like, well, what happened? I wonder, you know, did your hormones really change over the course of a decade, which they could completely reverse. The other thing, just generally, in a like, you know, sort of, I'll just use a heterosexual couple example. Like, if you're doing like a traditional masculine feminine balance in a relationship, actually, even if it is like two women, for example, or two guys, like you have to have a masculine and feminine for polarity, right? Absolutely. Like, I think that's pretty obvious for most people. And if that's triggering, I don't really care. But like, this is important
yes.
to understand, and you're just not going to hear this anywhere else. I've never heard anyone else talk about this. So, but as a lens to like consider for relationships, this will be a chapter in the book that I'm writing, is you know, how this impacts relationships. Because if you get together and the chemistry is great, and over time it's fading, one of the things that's possible is the chemistry is actually, the actual chemistry of the bodies of the people that are in the relationship together are changing. So the guy is becoming even more analytical, or the woman's becoming even more analytical, and therefore changing the polarity balance in a relationship through zinc supplementation, or like hyper zinc supplementation, which we've seen a lot through COVID. And we saw a lot of breakups during COVID, didn't we, too? Which I'm not at all saying like that's causation, but or correlation, but it's certainly possible. It's certainly it has happened, and we just don't know to what extent. I will say that. And it is happening right now. And it also causes bacterial infections when you have too much zinc supplementation. I've seen this with a friend who did a hair analysis, who was working with some of the top anti-aging doctors in the world, that are also friends of mine, that were not doing hair testing. And just because their practice was full, they like couldn't, they're like, you know, and we didn't have a team yet that was like staffed up large enough at that point to really help them. But this is several years back, and I remember hearing that conversation and going like, be careful, like you could develop some sort of bacterial infection, and definitely happened. So yeah, it's just really, really interesting to think about how that all connects.
Yeah, it is. And as you mentioned, you were able to bring up your testosterone significantly. And so it is really interesting. So that's the key point that you need to know, that copper is for estrogen, zinc is for testosterone. Obviously, women and men have both. It's just getting into the right balance, which is key. So I think it's so fascinating. I want to be mindful of your time. How much more do you have? Just
Yeah, I've got to hop in a couple seconds, but
okay,
or a couple minutes, but yeah, sure.
Yeah. So first, there's so much to cover. This is not like a easy subject. Well, it's an easy subject, but there's so much to it. Like, it's obviously, how many minerals are there in the body? How many minerals are we testing here?
Uh, Depending on the test, we use a couple different labs depending on where you are in the world. But up to, you could say around 60 elements are being tested, and then we're looking at ratios too.
Exactly.
So we're not just looking at individual elements. So there's a lot for sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have to look at all. It doesn't mean that all are as important as others, right? So
I just want to share. So, of course, in the show notes, I'm going to include a link where you could get, I believe it's 10% off the hair test. I actually just received 2 today. This is the envelope, simple little envelope. I ordered this 2 days ago, just arrived this morning. And because I care about my loved ones, I want them to optimize their health as well. So this was a gift for somebody as well. But that's how simple it is. It instructs you how to take your own hair and then send it off and get it tested, and then you'll get a result, and then you'll set up a consultation, and voila, you'll get a protocol to optimize your health. And it's pretty amazing. And I'm all about it. So anyways, I'm going to include all that in the show notes. Where can people best find you and follow you?
Yeah, I think Instagram's a good spot. We have a YouTube channel too. So just search Upgraded Formulas on YouTube, or youtube.com/upgraded formulas with an S. And I hope this was incredibly helpful. We have a Instagram page as well at Upgraded Formulas, and we covered so much in this episode. So
and there's
valuable. We can do a round 2 sometime too. Yeah, I know.
For sure.
But
I'm excited. You have a book as well coming. So do you have 1 minute to do a closing question?
Sure.
You do? Okay. Okay. My closing question to everybody is asking, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, obviously you've shared many, but if you were to share a life lesson that you've learned through your journey, just a piece of wisdom that you feel anybody needs to hear right now, what would that be?
Such a good question. I would say if there's something you're struggling with, then it's incredibly valuable. If something I do a lot, at least, is if I'm trying to find a solution to something and I'm struggling to do so, I'll ask myself, what advice would I give someone else who was in my exact position with the same resources and the same, or lack of resources, or the same, the whole, like, as many things as you can think of. And the answer that you get to that is surprising. Like, it might just be like, you just need to smile more, or like, you just need to trust more, or you just need to understand that, like, not everything's within your control, or you need to understand that, whatever it might be. Those are just a few examples. So I've got to run, but this was so fun. Erica, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let you go. I'll talk to you later. Have a blessed and beautiful day. Bye.